Good afternoon, and welcome to Smithsonian Gardens' weekly webinar series, Let's Talk Gardens. We're so excited to have you join us today. This is a topic we're going to be talking about to help you make your indoor green thumb greener. And it is a subject that I always want to learn more about because my house plants tend to be the tropical plants that I bring in. And that's exactly what Virginia is going to talk to us about today. All the variety and the diversity that we have our choices to be able to grow plants inside of our house. My name is Cindy Brown. I'm the Education and Collections Manager at Smithsonian Gardens. And Virginia Thaxton is our guest speaker today. Virginia works in our interior department, and she'll share a bit of information about that and jump into the houseplant diversity. So we hope that you're enjoying this beautiful day, and we hope that you enjoy this presentation. Virginia, you take it away. I'm going to disappear, and I'll join you after you finish to be able to ask questions. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell people, of course, put your questions in the chat box. And today, you're going to provide your own closed captioning. So follow the directions in the chat box, push the button that says live transcript, and then enable the closed caption to appear on your screen if that's something you prefer to see during the presentation. Thank you, Virginia. Go ahead and take it away.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today Let's Talk Gardens webinar. The topic I want to talk about today is houseplant diversity, and it's really, really cool. And also the benefits of taxonomy knowledge. I am a horticulturist with Smithsonian Gardens in the interiors section. This is my talk's outline. I'm going to quickly do an introduction of what is the interior section, what we do, and who we are. Then I'm going to introduce plant taxonomy, the basis of the science and the importance of it. Then the main block of the talk is going to be the plant families of houseplants. There's going to be a list of families. Where do houseplants belong to when it comes to the families of taxonomy, with photos and names, scientific and common names for all of them. And lastly, I'm going to briefly touch upon choices for specific plant needs. What does all houseplant diversity give us when it comes to choosing what we need? So first, Smithsonian Gardens interior section, what we do. When people think of Smithsonian, you think of the iconic Smithsonian Castle, all the museums in the National Mall, and all the gardens that are around there. So Smithsonian Gardens, which is a museum without walls, takes care of all those gardens that surround those buildings in the mall. But we also have an interior section, and what we do is we put interior tropical plants inside the museums. So for example, you can see some satin pothos at the National Asian Museum of Art, then some aglaonemas at the Natural History Museum, some dracaenas, snake plants, and aglaonemas at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So we do that. We beautify the museums with plants. We also provide dish gardens for reception desks at the museums where people first come in and ask for information. We put plants, beautiful plants in urns that are scattered around the museum in different spaces that we think need plants or we want to put plants in. Museums also request from us plants that they want to put in. We have special displays going on too. For example, at the Natural History Museum, we have the Garden Lounge, which is a space where people can view a little exhibit that we have about plant science, but also sit down, recharge your phones and things like that. So we have some really cool plants in there. We also do displays of orchids from our orchid collection in cases in the American History Museum. And from time to time, we do temporary arrangements for holidays in urns or for different events. Another space that we take care of, I personally do, is the Cogot Courtyard, which is this wonderful indoor space with a glass canopy that's in between the National Portrait Gallery and the American Art Museum. It's a beautiful space in DC, and we have 8 planters, marble planters like these. We have on a regular basis about 1,000 plants in there from 50 different cultivars and species of tropical plants. So it's a really unique area that we feel lucky to be able to be part of. So as an interiors team, we have to change out plants in museums a lot. And I'll go into a little bit why we change out plants further on when we talk about interior plants. So you can see a little bit of behind the scenes of when we do change outs. For example, in the Cogot Courtyard, we have to add soil because it compacts, it like breaks down sometimes the organic matter in the soil. So we take every plant out of the planter, we lay it on the floor on a tarp, we add the soil, then what replant, we redesign, we have fun with it. For museums that just have plants in containers, sometimes you see us, hauling around plants. Well, no, you won't see us. We usually do it before the museum opens, but this is a little bit of what goes on when we have to take plants in museums to change them out and keep them all beautiful looking for everybody to enjoy. Another part of the interiors team job is to create exhibits. As Smithsonian mission, education is important. So we create exhibits to let people know about the plant knowledge that we have and make beautiful displays of things that we want people to learn. So the team provides content for the script, that we create these beautiful informational panels, and right now we are also part of the Habitat exhibit. That's the series going on in all our campus. So the interiors team also has in the Cogot Courtyard part of that Habitat exhibit, and also at the Ripley Center, which that one is not open, but the Cogot Courtyard has reopened already. So you're welcome to go see our Habitat exhibit there. So that's roughly what we do. So who is in my team? Alexandra Thompson is one of our horticulturists, and she takes care of the space that I mentioned, the garden lounge. So here you see her in our greenhouse. We have slipped up a Dracaena that later on goes into the garden lounge. This is a team effort. Moving a plant that big is part of our job, and we enjoy creating spaces where people get to enjoy these big tropical plants. Melanie Pyle is our lead horticulturist. Again, she helps me install a lot of the plants in the courtyard. Her design mind is amazing. She comes up with a lot of the designs of how we display things. Here you see her installing for one of our past orchid exhibits, this wonderful bed full of Phalaenopsis orchids. And then Shannon Hill is our horticulturist that takes care of the interiors greenhouse here in the complex. And also she's our propagation person, and she's truly a magician when it comes to creating new baby plants. Lastly, there's me. As I told you, I take care of the Cogot Courtyard, so you sometimes see me up on a lift taking care of the plants. The fun part for me in this job is that a huge tropical tree like this black olive, it's just an indoor plant for me because it's inside this great conservatory type space like the Cogot Courtyard. And I'm definitely the person in the team that's always revising taxonomy, making labels, making sure all the plants are named correctly on displays or exhibits or whatever we put a plant, we try to name it. And I'm not a taxonomist, but I'm a biologist and horticulturist, and taxonomy is really important to me. So I'm always on top of things and revising it and making sure we get it right. So what is plant taxonomy and why is it important? So one really neat fact about the plant kingdom is look how many thousands, 400,000 different species of plants are in this kingdom. So it's just a lot to handle when you're trying to study them, to use them, to put them on display. Like, how do we go about that? So back in the 1700s, a classification system was developed by Carl Linnaeus. He was the first scientist to come up with a naming structure. Like, how do you give a plant a name? A name that is going to convey information about what is the species and what are his closest relatives. This classification system has levels. You know, it goes from the broad kingdom, like plant versus animal kingdom, and then it comes down to class, order, family. And the last two parts of the classification system are the unique name. The genus and species is what makes a plant unique. So the science that manages this classification system created by Linnaeus is called taxonomy, and from the Latin taxis and nomia, and that means method of arrangement. So taxonomists are the scientists that make this system work. How do they do that? Well, they study plants, and once they study them, they place the plants in a particular category, like we said, order, family, and give it a genus and species based on characteristics. This can be morphological, molecular, genetic, and I'll go into that a little bit more. That gives them a unique Latin name when they're studying them and classifying them and placing them in a certain location in the system. A plant's name consists of two parts, genus and species, the last two levels of the system. That's called a binomial nomenclature. And when we write these names, binomial nomenclature is kind of like what we have, you know, first name and last name. It's like a dual name that makes you unique, that says to somebody who you are. Same with plants or animals or any living thing. The name, when we write it, has to be italicized, and the genus is capitalized, but not the species. Sometimes you see the species also with capital. No, bring it to lowercase. It never should be capital letter. So having this system in place allows us to get to know plants on a first name basis. So, hey, who are you? What are you like? Let me know more about you. So that's why to me it's important to understand how their name and what their names mean and what they are. So it can also be really interesting and fun to know who's related to whom when it comes to houseplants. And we'll see that when I go through all the families. Sometimes you see two things that belong to the same family that are not necessarily looking alike, but for other reasons in their characteristics, they are family, and it's just fun information to have. So the basic to taxonomy is a science called phylogeny, which means origin of the tribe. That means that you are putting together and studying the evolutionary history of an organism, of a plant. Is like creating its family tree, like we do for us human beings. So when we're studying this evolutionary history, how do we do it? Taxonomies are gonna study a plant and classify it based on either morphological classification or phylogenetic, which is the genetic classification. So over centuries, morphological was the one used. You study a flower shape, the anatomy of a leaf, you study the metabolism of a plant. Is it a camp plant? How does it photosynthesize? Where does it place the plant? So we did that for centuries. Now, in the last 30 years, there's better and better technology to study DNA. And when you are able to study the DNA of a plant, it really takes you more in depth into, okay, what is the plant like? How does it function? What is it doing? How do things relate to each other? So I'm briefly going to describe to you what one of these phylogenetic trees look like. A phylogenetic tree is a diagram that represents all these evolutionary relationships among organisms. That this is how scientists that study them say, okay, we're going to create one of these because we need to know how things relate to each other. So the tree has a pattern of branching. There's like ancestors. You look at your ancestors like you do family trees for humans. You look at your ancestor, and then as plants evolve, they diverge, they mutate, they change, they look different and different, but they're still related, right? They have a common ancestor. So this pattern shows you where do they come from, how are they grouping together. Now, one thing that describes how closely they are to each other is this length here of these branches are the genetic distance. And if this genetic distance is really close, that means this group, which is called a clade, and this group are going to be really close together, and they're part of this one, and these are all connected. So eventually it determines, scientists that know more about this would determine, okay, these are all part of the same genus because their genetic distances are really tiny. So we need to keep them together. So there's revisions as time goes by, and a lot of scientists have more money and more grants to study certain different like families and genuses, then they're going to revise these trees. So with DNA sequencing, you can compare species better and look at this level of knowledge of them that's past just how do the flower look, how does the leaf look. I'm going to give you one example of like a genus that has changed name very recently. Well, recently, the last 10 years, there's a lot of research papers published on it. Sansevieria, which is the snake plant that most people know and use, has been reclassified to the genus Dracaena. Dracaena are the corn plants. You know, at first sight, a corn plant and a snake plant, not quite the same looking plant, but even over the past few decades, scientists were already arguing, well, the flower structure is the same. Their morphology is very similar. Why aren't they in the same genus? So studies now with DNA don't get too overwhelmed by this, but I'll just quickly show you. This is similar to the tree I was showing. This is Sansevieria, and you see, this is like a couple of clades groups. These distances that related to Dracaena are very short when it comes to phylogeny terms. So even there's two Sansevieria species that fell embedded in the Dracaena genus once they made this study. After this, they said, okay, these two things are basically have one common ancestor that's close enough, and both of them are the same genus. So that makes all of Sansevierias are now Dracaenas. And that's very neat to know that, because it places it where it needs to be, where it's right. So with all these new revises and new DNA data that we are doing, in the late 1990s, scientists from all over the world created the Angiosperm phylogeny group. And their job or their mission was, let's establish the objectives and the point of reference for like, how do we name them? How do we classify them? So there's all these rules, and they are the ones that dictate and determine, okay, which family is really a family, or sometimes when there's science that shows, oh, these two genus should combine, you go here. In 1998, the APG1, the first document that was published, came out. But since then, of course, more and more DNA sequencing techniques have become cheaper, easier to use. So there's further revisions, and we're up to APG4, which was published in 2016, and it recognizes 416 families of flowering plants, which are the ones I'm covering today. So, okay, so you say, okay, we have all this knowledge about taxonomy, and my face is here like, do I really need to know that? It kind of could be complicated, or it's so annoying when the plant names change and I have to memorize a new one, or like, what do I do? It's just not good. But there's two reasons why this is important. When you have a unique and accurate name for a plant, you can easily communicate information about it, no matter who you're talking to or where you are, because common names are not unique. They can be subjective, they can vary geographically, they can vary by language too, in different languages, while the Latin name is the same everywhere. So it's just a good information to have. So once you have your plant identified properly, it allows you to get the right information about what care it needs, what it is, what do I do with it, right? So if you have better information, you have less miscommunication about a plant, and you end up with happier plants. So this is important. Now, plant names change at the scientific level, but sometimes it takes longer for like all the web pages out there to show that or to reflect that, or nurseries or garden centers. It doesn't change everywhere at the same time, but there are certain places, the authorities in taxonomy, that are gonna have the latest updates. So I encourage everybody, because I do it for my job, but you don't have to be a horticulturist or a scientist to stay up to date. Like, so where do we double check scientific names? There's multiple websites. Some of them are, harder to navigate, but this one that I'm putting on the screen, which is overseen by Kew Gardens, is the World Checklist of Vascular Plants, and is very user-friendly. And if you just type in, when it first just type in a name that you find in a book, in a website, just type it and see, is it really accepted as it is right now, or it is now a synonym of a new name, and that way you get to know the actual current scientific name. Okay, so now we go to the main part of my talk, houseplant families. This is going to be a list of relatives. Okay, so among all the houseplants that we have out there, there's huge diversity. And when I was putting the talk together, part of me thought, wow, this is a lot of plants. And like, I could do a whole week series of webinars or a course on like every family and every individual plant, or like what are they like, and I'm not going to do that. I don't have the time, but I wanted this to be more of like this visual, like, wow, look at all that's out there. Look at the resource that I have to choose from. As you know, if you've seen some of our webinars before, this recording will be posted in our website about a week from now. So if there's anything that catches your eye, you're going to have to go back and look at the recording, because I'm not going to be able to name out every single plant that I have on the list. But I'm going to give you, this is a guidance of what's going to happen. So I have at least 28 families have houseplants that belong to them. And that means 105 genera in my compilation. That's just genera. It doesn't include cultivars or species, but 105 genera. There's a lot to choose from. So I'm going to have photos. One thing about the photos for this talk, they're all either my photos or my coworkers. I decided not to go on the internet and try to choose pictures and go into the whole, copyright issues. So these are all photos taken by me or my friends. So there's a few plants that I didn't have photos of, but I still am putting the scientific name and common name on that page, so you see which family it belongs to. Again, they're all going to be written down. You may either take a quick screenshot or just look at the video again. And then a quick disclaimer here, the pronunciation. Now, I'm a Spanish speaker, so when I pronounce the Latin names, they're probably going to sound different than what you might have heard them pronounced. But the truth is, there's no right or wrong. So don't ever be afraid to say out a name, scientific name, because it's like, oh, that's hard to read. Just say it. It's just people are going to understand, or at least they'll be like, hey, cool, you can say a Latin name. And it doesn't matter. The idea is that at least you have it written down, or you know what it is, and that way you get the right information about it. So instead of just going the whole 28 alphabetically, I sort of grouped them, my own grouping, to kind of have a better flow. And I grouped them. I'm going to start with the families that have either the most members that are used as houseplants. They're widely used. They're very well known. Then I'm gonna talk about a few families that have just one genus per family. That's a houseplant. Obviously, the families have many genus, but the one that is used as a houseplant, and they have beautiful flowers and beautiful plants. Then the group that I call the tropical icons: palms, bromeliads, orchids, ferns. Every time you see one, it's like, wow, tropics, it speaks tropics. So we're gonna go over some of those families. And at the end, we're gonna go over the families that belong to the succulent group, plants that don't require as much water and have different metabolism and makes them a succulent. So here's my first family, the first page, and this is what it's gonna look like. Lots of photos. Each of them is gonna have on top their scientific name, their common name. And the family. So the arum family, Araceae, has the most genera species of houseplants and have been used the longest. You get all of your anthuriums here. The flamingo flower is such a common plant in the tropics. This is not as common, but it's really cool. The king anthurium or the Faustinus giant anthurium. They're all cousins to the peace lily, which is a tricky one to have at home, but it's also a beautiful flower. So you get the anthuriums, and anthuriums are related to just all the philodendrons that are out there, which are really, really cool plants. Some of them have really big leaves, very tropical looking, different colors, different shapes. So the philodendrons are just awesome. A lot of people really like them, and they are very rewarding because they are easy to care for. Then in the Araceae family, we also have the monstera, the Swiss cheese plant, which is really cool, and people just love the shape of that leaf. We have the Dieffenbachia, the dumb cane. You have to be careful with pets with this one. You have the arrowhead plant, lots of aglaonemas, which are very, very common in office spaces. Different cultivars, different leaf variegations. They're very cool. Then in the Araceae, you also have the sissi plant up here. The sissi plants are very famous for being able to take low light, low water. So they're very easy to care for. We also have the pothos, the golden pothos, the satin pothos. They're actually different genus, Epipremnum or Syndapsus, but the common name is pothos. So that's again, it's like the satin pothos is not exactly going to be the same as the golden pothos. You got to look at the actual scientific name. And then these are two that used to be called philodendrons, the Ceylon philodendron, the Xanadu philodendron, and they actually have changed names to Taumatophyllum. But they're still super popular and widely used. The second family is Asparagaceae, the asparagus family. The asparagus plant we eat as a vegetable is a relative of the spider plant, or the cast iron plant. That's really cool. In some of these families, I'm going to be showing you some plants, some species that are kind of newer to the houseplant world that people nowadays are finding out there. When I belong to like IDing groups for plants, you see people asking, what is this? And I see that they're more and more available out there for people to buy. One example is the silver squill, a really neat plant from South Africa. It's very cute. We have it in the greenhouse, and I also put one in Kogut. So Ledeboria. Asparagaceae has all the dracaenas, the corn plants if it's Dracaena fragrans, but it's called dragon tree if it's Dracaena marginata. The Madagascar dragon tree, and you have different variegations. Dracaenas are really good for office and house spaces. In the Asparagaceae, you have more Dracaenas. The Dracaena corn plant Lisa, for example, the cultivar Lisa is used in offices a lot. It's a tall one that you can put in the corner and looks so lushy green. The ponytail palm is cousins with the Dracaenas. And here are the Sansevierias that change names. So now they're called Dracaena trifasciata, Dracaena angolensis, Dracaena ceylanica. And I know it's going to be hard to get used to it, but as a scientist, I'm happy that, we got it right. We did the DNA testing, we got it right. And flower-wise, these, for example, that used to be called the Sansevieria cylindrica, now Dracaena angolensis, the flowers are just like a Dracaena lisa. So another family that has really cute flowers is the Gesneraceae, the African violet family. African violets have been around for a long, long time, but this family also has some kind of new arrivals. The Alsovia dianthiflora lace flower has really, really pretty flowers. Look at those fringes on the petals. The lipstick vine Eschinanthus is really beautiful. It's a very prolific bloomer. We have Apicia, which is a flame violet, a little finicky with their leaves and humidity, but it's really a neat plant. It can be very rewarding too. Acanthaceae is the Acanthus family. Look at these leaves. I mean, like the nerve plant or the polka dot plants. So there's so many colors, and even just foliage plants that are not blooming can give you color, can give you texture, can give you so many different things. So that's just kind of cool. Acanthaceae also have the zebra plant. I didn't have a picture for that one, but that one is well known. Araliaceae is the ginseng family. Here we have the scheffleras, which are very common office plants, and people know them. Oh, they drop a lot of leaves. They can be finicky. You have your Ming Aralias, the Fatsias, and also your English ivy. Now, people still grow English ivy in homes. Some of us are weary of it because ivy can't be invasive if it were to be released outside or planted outside. So just be careful with that. But it can still be grown as a potted plant indoors. The Marantaceae has amazing leaf colors and even like tiny cute flowers. Maranta, the main genus here, is really cute. The Stromanthi is mostly used outdoors in subtropical environments, but is becoming more popular as an indoor plant if you have a really bright window to put it in. It requires sun to keep those colors. There's also the Calatheas or Calatheas, depending on how you pronounce that, and they have changed name too. So the new name is Gepertia. The rattlesnake plant, the rose-painted Calatheas, they've changed to Gepertia. They're just amazing. Look at those, it's like somebody painted them, right? It's just so pretty. And there are lots of cultivars to choose from. The family Comelinaceae is the spiderwort family. We have in the east of the US our native Tradescantia virginiana, which is like our native Tradescantia, which actually has blue flowers or kind of dark purple rather than these pinky ones. But in the tropics, the Comelinaceae are really cool. For example, this picture I took in Puerto Rico, look at this Sabrina, just as a carpet on the forest floor. But they also do great indoors and in containers or hanging baskets. In the Comelinaceae, we also have this new plant that we have in the greenhouse that people are beginning to use. It's maybe not as easy to find as a Ledeborea, but it's getting there. And it has really cute flowers, the weeping blue ginger. So worth giving a try if you're looking for something new and different. Try to get it. Amaryllidaceae, there's some amaryllis from the tropics. Now, they're not genus Amaryllis like ours, but Hypeastrum or Hippeastrum. Then there's also the Clivia miniata, which is a wonderful plant from South Africa. We have some in the greenhouse, and I just love the flowers. Then the family Moraceae is the mulberry family. A lot of these species are huge trees in the tropics, but they've adapted to offices and homes really good. You have the weeping fig, which has been used forever. The Ficus microcarpa is really cool. There are a lot of fig, and the fiddle leaf fig has become really, really popular indoors. Now, these ones require bright light when it comes down to being indoors. The more in the Moraceae, more ficus. There's lots of ficus. The Ficus pumila, the creeping fig, is mostly used for topiaries or terrariums. It's kind of way different than a banana leaf fig. And then this new plant that is used or known in the houseplant world is actually endemic to Brazil. I believe a little bit endangered in their natural habitat, but it propagates easily, so it's become a common houseplant. Well, not so common yet, but I think it will. And it's called Dorstenia elata. It's so rainforest looking. I like it. Then we have the Orchidaceae family, and thankfully, none of these plants are going to be like our stinging nettle, right? They don't have that kind of situation of causing problems. But look, this cute little pilea with tiny leaves called the silver sparkles plant. It creates really neat hanging baskets. A lot of the pileas have very beautiful leaves, like divination gives a lot of texture. And this plant, the watermelon vine, it's also sort of new, Peleonia pulchra, and it's called watermelon vine because if you look at the variegation on the leaves, it looks like the outside of a watermelon. This one likes a lot of humidity. It's really neat. People use it at the bottom of bonsai sometimes. Now I'm going to list some of the families that have just one genus per family that belong to the houseplant world. Begonias, rhizomatous begonias. Look at the magnificent colors and leaves that it has. Then you also have your cane begonias, all the angel wings, and the tuberose begonias. Some of the ones we plant outside in the summer as annuals are tuberose begonias, but there's some that can be grown double flower that can be grown indoors, and they're really neat. And then my favorite begonia is the painted rex or painted leaf begonia. They're a work of art. Look at all the different cultivars and the colors, and they have very cute flowers too. Begonias have both, like the foliage that's amazing and the flower that's really cute. The Bignoniaceae family has only the Raderma chera, and this is a humongous tree in the tropics. If it grows outside, it's just huge. But it seems to be used because of the texture and the look it has indoors in a container. This is in the covered courier, so it's not containerized, but it has that neat look of green, lush, tropical. The Melastomataceae, which is a unique family that has these parallel veins, and it's just so iconic, people recognize, oh, that's a melastome, has one genus of tropical plants from Philippines called Medinilla. And Medinillas have this wonderful like hanging inflorescence that are pink, and they can be a little bit trickier indoors, but if you have bright lights or a sunroom, it's just like really beautiful plants. It's worth trying to grow them. The Oxalidaceae, you know, all the oxalis plants, we see weeds everywhere in our area. There's one species, Oxalis triangularis, that has purple leaves and these cute little flowers, and it looks good in containers. It can grow outside in the summer, and it has little corms that it goes dormant in the winter. Not if it's indoor, but if it's outdoors, it can go dormant in the winter. Then the Piperaceae is the pepper family. The pepper that we use for spicing things up, it's from this family. And there's the genus Peperomia, which is like wonderful, kind of like hard succulent leaves. And this one is called the watermelon Peperomia. Here's an example of why common names can be misleading. We have the watermelon vine, which was genus Pellionia, and then we have a Peperomia that's also called watermelon. So knowing the scientific name is important. Still, you gotta admire this variegation that looks like a watermelon. The Peperomia, Pixie Peperomia is so cute, Peperomia orba. Then the Primulaceae also has the one genus of tropical primroses that are used indoors, the cyclamen or cyclamen, and it's the floricyclamen, and it's just really cute flowers. I personally have never gotten them to rebloom indoors, but that gift is given in the winter as like the flowering plant to have indoors alongside the poinsettias. So now some of our tropical famous plants, you know, palms, ferns, orchids, I'm going to talk about those. The Ericaceae is the palm family. You have your Kentia palm. The Habuea is like really good for low light, is known for that. You have the Arica palm. You also have the lady palm, which is like really cute in containers. I love those leaves that it has. Then there's also the Phoenix robellini. This one was installed in the courtyard. It's in the process of being installed for an exhibit. So it was alone in the bed. It's like, okay, that's a perfect picture. So there's lots of palms to choose for. Not every palm does well indoors, but there's some that really work. The Bromeliaceae is the pineapple family. So pineapples grow on plants that look like this. They're terrestrial bromeliads, and some of these are epiphytes. That means that grow up on the trees, but they just have so many different colors of blooms. The Guzmanias, Acmea, Vriesia, Neuragelia. There's really neat variety of bromeliads, and they're good to have indoors. They're easy to care for. They don't require a lot of watering because they have this cup where they hold water, and they create these microenvironments in the rainforest for animals and insects. It's like really cool plants. In the Bromeliaceae is also the air plants, the Tillandsia and the Spanish moss that we have in the southeast, and they're also like really cool plants. I mean, who would have thought they're related to a pineapple, right? They're very, very cool. And this is a new plant, a new bromelia that's being grown as a house plant, and it's really cool. Look at those leaves. It's called the Orthophytum gurneckii. So it's from Brazil, and it's just new and really cool, worth trying to grow it indoors. Then the Orchidaceae, it's the divas of the plant world, right? We have a wonderful orchid collection at the Smithsonian Gardens, and these are some of the genera that are more popular indoors. They're kind of easier to care for, not so specialized. And you have the moth orchid, the boat orchid, the cane orchid, wonderful colors, wonderful shapes. You have the tropical lady sleepers. They're different than our native lady sleeper, but the Paphiopedilums are really, really neat. The Cattleyas, my favorite because they are the national flower of Colombia, where I'm from. So that's like a really cool flower. And the Oncidiums, I love the name Dancing Ladies. Then we get into ferns. Ferns have different families that cover ferns. Aspleniaceae has the bird nest ferns. They perform wonderful in the courtyard. I know they're good for the home. They're not as, let's say, delicate as some of the other ferns when it comes to humidity, so that's a good thing. Then Polypodiaceae has a lot of different genus of general ferns. The very traditional Boston fern, Nephrolepis. And then you have the staghorn ferns that are so cool because you can display it or mount on this wood on the wall. You can also make big hanging baskets. I used to see that in Puerto Rico. Then you have your holly ferns, Japanese Indian holly ferns. We don't tend to use ferns as much in the museums other than garden lounge or the courtyard sometimes because they require higher humidity and more constant watering. And sometimes in our routine, we don't water more than once a week in the museums. Another family of ferns is cherry daisy, the maidenhair family. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of a maidenhair. That was ours, so I didn't put it in, but most of you know what it looks like. Then there's the brake ferns, the silver ribbon ferns. They're very neat. Neat humidity. So some of these plants are not going to be easy to care for, but there's still just so much variety out there. It's awesome. Now we're going to cover the succulents. One of the families that has succulent plants is Apocynaceae, the dogbane family, but it includes all the Hoyas. And I know people go crazy about Hoyas. Hoyas have so many different leaf shapes and very amazing flowers. So I like this genus too. Then we have in the Apocynaceae also Stapelia, the starfish cactus, which are really cool looking. And this one used to be called Stapelia variegata. Now it's Orbea variegata, another name change that I'm always keeping up with. They are very cool plants. This one has a little bit of a smell because these guys are pollinated by flies. So their fragrance is not what we call, oh, that's so nice, but still, it just makes them really cool. They are evolving alongside their pollinators, so they adapt to things like that. Aspholi daisy is the aloe family. So, you know, you have your medicinal aloe vera that everybody knows, and it can be used as a wonderful houseplant. But you also get all these hybrids of star aloes, and they have really pretty flowers, usually spike up an inflorescence from a tiny rosette. Then you have your zebra cactus that used to be Haworthia, now is Haworthiopsis. They're very cute. My son asked me to buy these a few years ago for him and still at our house. Then in the Asphodilesi, you have the Haworthias that zebra cactus are not part of anymore, but it's still there. They have these amazing little cushion plants, and then Gasteria has very cute flowers. These are so unique and wonderful if you are into succulents, because the flowers are very pretty. Asteraceae, I put it in here because, believe it or not, it has a lot of tropical succulents. It also has your daisies that we know, but the only daisy that we grow indoors as a houseplant or potted plant is the Gerber daisy. But it has really cool cacti looking plants, like the pickle plant. It's a crazy looking guy. Then you have your string of pearls, string of bananas. These are in the genus Curio. They used to be Senecios, for those of you that maybe know some plant names. So Senecios have changed, but look at their flowers. I mean, it's an aster flower. It's not really your typical cactus or succulent flower. And Cactaceae, of course, is a succulent family. And there's Opuntias that grow out in the Southwest, but some people grow them indoors too. And of course, the Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter cactus all belong nowadays in the genus Schlumbergera. Some of them used to be somewhere else and have changed, but now they're all unified as Schlumbergera. And they're just really cool. This one is actually my plant at my house. I love it. The mistletoe cactus is very unique looking. Of course, this cactus has these amazing flowers. They're called orchid cactus because they kind of look like an orchid, being a succulent. Now, some common names are rat tail cactus. I'm not quite sure I want to have that with me, but still, variety, diversity in names, in forms, in everything. Then you have the golden barrel cactus, Mammillaria, Astrophytum, so many different cool shapes and forms. And I didn't have any of these blooming, but you know, cacti blooms are just like really, really amazing. Another succulent family that's famous is the Crassulaceae, the stonecrop family. You have your calanchos or kalanchoe, or yeah, how do you want to pronounce it? The Flores calanchos are really popular. Every grocery store has them, but there's also some other calancho species. Tomentosa is really unique. Look at the edges of fuzzy leaves. You have your calancho pumila. Then you also have the donkey ears, and there's also other succulents in Crassulaceae, like the hen and chicks, the cute little Echeveria succulents with so many pretty flowers. The jade plant, very popular and used everywhere. The propeller plant is not as common, but it's also very neat. I love the leaves. In the Crassulaceae, there's also the sedums, the burrow's tail. It's just like, look at the growth of this plant. So a lot of people are very attracted by the sedums. The stonecrops are really very unique plants. Very little care, of course, because they don't need water every day or attention every day. The last family I'm covering is the Euphorbiaceae, the spurge family, and it has some really, really cool tropical succulents like the pencil cactus or the crown of thorns. Euphorbia millii is one of my favorites. Those flowers are just neat. You also get the Euphorbia lactea. Now, if it comes in a crested form, it's the coral cactus. If it comes in the ghost cultivars, they call them the candelabra spurge. So very unique looking plants. And last but not least, it's not a succulent, but it's part of this family. And I wanted to mention it because, I mean, everybody uses poinsettias at the end of the year for the holidays. We are at Smithsonian Gardens, our production team grows 2,000 of them every year. And the interiors team, another job we have is decorate for holiday the museum. So we put lots of poinsettias in the museum. Some of you might have noticed that if you visit us in December. So to wrap up the talk, I want to introduce some choices for specific plant needs. So of all this diversity that's out there, I mean, it gives us choices, which is really cool. I mean, if the plant comes from the rainforest, it's going to be a plant that requires humidity and less light and more water. If it comes from Africa, the dry forest or the African savannas, then it's going to be a plant more cacti looking, more desert looking. It doesn't require as much. So we have all these availability of resources and things we can get. But I wanna make a statement here. There's lists out on the internet, right? Top 10 low light plants, top 10 easy to grow plants, or what are the high light plants, what require low water. And I did compile, based on books and internet, some of these categorized in low, medium, high for the different categories. But I want to say, be aware of oversimplifying. Does a plant belong to this or that group? Because all growing factors overlap, light and water overlap. So it's going to depend. And the ease of care depends on where you're placing your plant. If you're placing it in a place where it doesn't belong, it's going to struggle, and then it's not going to be easy to care for. So performing well in a certain category, either like light, water, temperature, things like that, it's going to depend on the growing conditions. And also the plant quality. If you buy a plant that's not very healthy, then the root system is going to be stressed out or dying. And even if it's under this plant requires a lot of water, if you water it a lot and it doesn't have a good root system, it's going to end up dying. So that's the things to look for. When you buy a plant, does it have a pest? Because if it has a pest, it's just not going to do well anywhere you put it. So the key here is to know the plant's name and not just assume, oh, because it's in this group, it should belong to the low light or the high light. So know the name and research it, look it up, like what does it need, and be observant, interact with your plant. You know, a lot of people say, oh, certain plants thrive on neglect. I personally think nobody thrives on neglect. So you have to be observant. You have to interact with your plant. Even if it's a plant that requires very low needs, you still got to know that, and you got to see how it's performing, because the location might not be the right one. So these, again, are something that I'm not going to name every single one. You probably can look at the video again if you're interested in these kind of tables. But I mean, all this information is out there on books, the internet. If you want, what are the best plants for low light? Just, you search it online and you'll find it. But I wanted to make a couple of comments here. For example, a CC plant, it says, yeah, low light, and it can tolerate it for sure. But then you have to be careful. If you were to put it in high light, which doesn't mind, I have plenty of CC plants in the courtyard loving light, then that means they're going to require different amounts of water. Normally it falls in the low light, low water category, but it depends on where you put it. So you got to look at individual examples. And when it comes to water, for example, succulents and cacti, everybody thinks, oh, they just don't need much water, right? Once a month is enough. Well, there's exceptions. The Schlumbergera, the ones I was telling you, the Easter, Christmas, and Thanksgiving cactus, they are actually epiphytes that grow in cloud mountain forests in Brazil. So they love humidity. They would never like to dry out completely. They don't like full sun. So there's little things like that, that just because it's a succulent or in the Cactaceae family, doesn't mean it behaves like every cactus. So just research it, look it up. High water. Yeah, normally they would take high water, but if you have it in a very low light environment or the root system is struggling, then it's just not going to want that much water, because then it's going to drown. When it comes to maintenance too, you're going to have low, medium, high. You can always kind of divide plants like that. And what I want to say about high maintenance plants, it's like, yeah, they're going to need more interaction from you. They're going to need you to look at it more than once a week. Some of them don't like drafts, don't like being moved. They like high humidity. So you have to think of a humidifier or pebble tray, or spray them or something like that. If you really are the kind of houseplant parent that says, well, I want plants in my space, but maybe just once a week, then, try to look for low maintenance plants. So the plant itself is not going to suffer from you not giving it what it needs. But again, there's choices to go anywhere in the spectrum where you want. You want a medium, you want high, you want low. So that's the cool thing. We have so many within all those 28 families that I cover. There's so many options for everyone. When it comes to availability, then you have your proven old timers: philodendrons, peace lily, ficus, scheffleras, spider plants. But then, like I introduced you to some of those newer ones, some pictures I had. Yeah, somebody say, hey, let's try a lace flower vine, let's try a China-doll. And so there's nowadays more and more choices to look for and places to try to get them. So that ends my talk. What my message is: really do your research, try to know the correct name of your plant when you get one. Put your heart into what you do. Don't let it just sit there. I mean, even if it's a low need plant, if you know it and you're giving it what it needs, then it's going to be rewarding, and you're going to be like, oh, I'm interacting with it. And that's the pleasure that comes from owning plants and decorating your indoor spaces with plants and bringing nature indoors. That's the name of our exhibit in the co-ed courtyard. The great indoors, like how do we bring nature inside? Because we as humans need that connection to nature. So it's important. It's important to know the science behind, to know the correct name. Like I said, know the plant on a first name basis. And that's the message I have.
Wow, that was terrific, Virginia. It went fast.
So many of them. I know it
people.
goes fast, and I
Yes,
hope everybody goes back and look at the video. But I
exactly.
really wanted to, in one chunk, just show everything. It's just this visual, like, wow, look at this.
Well, your
So
passion is exuberant. So we all are. It's contagious. I am now thinking about what else I can add to my house. My husband might not like you at all. But you bring up a good point. We will post this on our website, and so people will be able to go back and look for it. We also have the list of names that you've covered as a handout on the website too. So you'll find it on our learning section on Let's Talk Gardens. It's easy to be able to find. So it won't be a PowerPoint, but it will be a video that goes up and shows. You also really emphasize something as a horticulturist I've tried to share my whole career. If you know the Latin name, you know where the plant is from, you have a better chance of making the plant thrive. That is really key. You can't do generalizations for the most part. You can, and a lot of plants will perform as described, but it's so much better to know what that plant is, what the scientific name is, and where it's from, and you will truly get a greener thumb. I can guarantee you that, just like you said. So I have a number of questions after all that. I just wanted to say, know your plants is right. So plants that can be used in a low light classroom for life sciences lessons. Can we use some of the ones that are on your list?
yes, definitely. And talking of low light plants, dracaenas, aglaonemas, the cast iron plants, even palms like a Kentia palm. There's some philodendrons that do very low light, like the trailing philodendron. It's called the heartleaf philodendron. CC plants do well. Now, so yeah, you can look at that. Definitely, offices tend to be very dark, and offices focus on dracaenas and aglaonemas, which are the Chinese evergreens. Some people, the common name is that. The pothos are wonderful for low light and also don't require too much care or watering. So yes, you can definitely, even though it's a generalization, these definitely are proven to work in those conditions. And we use some of these in our museums because they have spaces with very low light.
That'd be great. And it's really easy, especially if you were when you talked about changing the watering on some of the low light plants or changing the watering in some of the highlight plants. That's a really good way to bring in life sciences, because then you can do experiments on the type of conditions. And if you pick something that you know is going to do well and use that as the control plant, and then you can go crazy with all your different conditions that you're adding in. Terrific. This one I want to know. Are there any house plants that can grow in low light that have fragrant flowers? Because all these will flower in the right amount of light, but I don't know about fragrance.
No. Wow, good question. I personally don't know of any that very few things bloom in low light.
Right.
But with fragrance, no, because I mean you have your orchids, some of them have fragrance, they wouldn't, they definitely wouldn't grow in low light. I can't think of any, but
I couldn't
it's
either.
something I need to research. Maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
but you're right. It needs higher light in order for it to bloom.
yeah,
So if you know, there are certain of the plants in the African violet family that will be fragrant, but you need higher light to be
yeah.
able to get it to grow. So just like your plants outside, a tomato plant.
Or even like your
Also,
indoor gardenias, which come from
yeah.
South Africa, most of them, they have amazing fragrance, but they definitely be near a window with enough light. Flowering is something that takes up a lot of energy from the plant, so they
Mhm.
need to have this like photosynthesis in full gear. So yeah, that
Yeah.
I couldn't come up with one.
Yeah, me neither. So don't feel bad. I was reaching back years trying to remember anything that I grew. Are there any tricks for growing Begonia escargot? The person's plant has new leaves that shrivel, but the old leaves are fine. What do you think? That almost sounds like a light or a water thing.
It might be if the new leaves shrivel, it could be. I mean, begonias, people say, oh, let them dry out completely, but you gotta be careful because they really don't like to be too dry. They are going to wilt, especially new growth. So I make sure you're checking the soil moisture like all throughout the pot, or like leave the pot if it's too lightweight, it needs more water. Especially if some leaves are better than others, I would say it's water.
Yep, I agree, but it could be a fungal problem. And that was another question that how do you
Yes.
combat or prevent fungal infections in houseplants? Because if the new growth is getting a fungus, they will drop off, where the old leaves may be a little bit more conditioned to the area. So what do you do to prevent funguses on your plants?
Um, I I don't seem to have that issue at my house because my heat is on a lot. So it dries out. Even when I miss them, it dries them out. Um, I mean, I we don't have really like home remedies for fungi that
Mhm.
much. I mean, for other pests, you can use your soap, insecticidal soap, or horticulture oil that is like over the counter. Um, I actually don't have a remedy for fungus. I mean, obviously in the greenhouses, we treat them with things like sulfur can be a good fungicide. But I, since I haven't had the experience at home, I mean, other than if it already has it, it's more likely that leaf definitely won't recover, because once the tissue is infected, it won't recover. So you will need to cut off whatever has a fungus on it. And then at that point, either like move the plant to a drier place or to better light, or stop watering it as much. Sometimes the cultural practices is what needs to change to prevent fungi or to cure it. I mean, nothing cures it completely from the leaf
Mhm.
that's already been affected. That's
Yeah.
for sure. Now, if it's in the root system, then it could be treated with some fungicide, and they do sell some at like Home Depot or Walmart. I know some people like to stay away from chemicals, so the non-chemical fungicides, I don't know many. Do you know?
Yeah, no, not non-chemical, but cultural care is so important. So if you keep your plant too moist and it's in low light conditions, you're guaranteed to get a fungal problem. So I would say cultural care is your best recommendation. Get good air circulation. Have a fan that blows on them. I
Yeah.
do that to a lot of my seedlings to prevent funguses from attacking the plant. So try some fans on it if you have a problem with it. Now I know that all the plants you talked about bloom because that's what we're talking about. But how do you get a ponytail palm to bloom? Have you ever gotten one to bloom?
Only when they're like huge, huge, huge. I've never owned them in my house. I've seen them blooming in greenhouses. So I think the ponytail palm needs to just get to a certain age and have a lot of light to bloom.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a little one in a pot blooming. Now the picture I show is actually from one of my coworkers. He has it in his house. I should ask him if he has bloom for him. But some of these plants, especially in the asparagus, they need to get big. They need to just have a lot of years in them, a lot of growth and a lot of light.
Yep, I agree. I saw one in a greenhouse out in Colorado just recently. It was probably 20 feet tall and it was blooming. That's how I know for sure it does bloom,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
to go along with it. Let's see, ZZ, oh shoot, now I can't read. Ravens? Ravens? ZZ Ravens? Is there a ZZ
I think it's
Ravens?
the one with the very dark leaves. It's a
Yeah, any
cultivar, yeah.
tips to keep that growing?
Well, CC plants, just try to find the right place for them. Now, I think the ones with darker leaves prefer a little bit higher light than low light. And don't water it too much. You always have to, with those, since it depends on the light where it's at, just make sure you always, don't just water them on a schedule. Water them based on soil moisture, like put your finger in there a couple of inches in, or leave the pot if it's a small pot. And you want to keep it with a little bit of moisture, or let them dry out like in between waterings. I mean, you moisten them, don't drench them completely in water.
Okay.
But also the light, I've never grown the dark cultivar. That's a newer version of it. I don't have personal experience with it, but with any plant, just making sure it's placed in the right conditions for it. And sometimes making sure you test the soil before you water. Some people assume, okay, I was told water once a week, I'll just water once a week. But it depends. If it was a cloudy week, the plant didn't use up that water in the soil as much as it would on a very sunny week. Even if it's in a low light situation in your house, when it's bright sunny outside, the house is just lit up more than if it's a cloudy week. So
Exactly. I'm with you. I like that you put the light measurements on the light thing, because that's really, people think that they have highlight, and a lot of times they do not. So
yeah.
the foot candles are going to make a difference.
And they sell very, very economic
Mhm.
light meters. Just order it on Amazon or something if you want to play around with like how bright is my space or not. And you'll be surprised how low light our houses are.
Right, and how quickly it drops from away from the window,
Oh, I know.
very, very quickly. So don't put it on the dining room table. Oh, look, I've got great light. Well, yeah, right by the windowsill you do, but not on your
Right.
dining room table.
You know, one thing that I think I forgot to read in my introduction of the houseplant list. I mean, houseplants, tropical plants have adapted to be houseplants in part because they can tolerate low light, and they love the temperatures of indoors. They couldn't take the cold outside, but it doesn't mean that it's ideal conditions for them. Our houses have very low humidity compared to what they're used to. I mean, the non-desert plants. So yeah, you still sometimes are kind of keeping them in places where they survive, but they're not thriving.
Right.
So knowing the plan and trying to find the perfect spot for it. And sometimes, I mean, you really want to plant here, it's not going to do the greatest, but you can make it be, or maybe every couple of years you have to replace it, or sometimes you put it close to the window for a little bit, then bring it back. Or I know Cindy brings a lot of her house plants outside during the summer. A lot of them don't mind that. I mean, sometimes they drop leaves if you move them, but it's okay. Then they get to kind of get fresh air and better light for a little bit.
Yep, they really do enjoy that. So, because we're running out of time, I want people to understand a good place that they can find out what their house plan is. Because is there, like, Plant Snap is one app that you can take a picture of an outdoor plant and you'll be able to determine what that plant is. Is there something like that for an indoor plant or a house plant?
Ooh, I've never used one. I mean, I wonder. I'm sorry, but since I'm this like taxonomy nerd, like a lot of the times I don't use the apps. I just like I photograph a plant. I really go like research it online the hard way
Okay.
because it's entertaining to me. But I know there's a lot of apps out there. I don't use them, but I am curious now to know if they do house plans.
Well, if we find out, we'll put it on our
Yeah, we'll
website
put
and
it.
see.
That's
Yeah,
a good question. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure you can also like search online. Are there any apps that do indoor tropicals?
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that will work. Okay, last one before we go. The bromeliad flowered, how do they get it to reflower? And I know the answer, but I'm going to let you say, give them the bad news.
Okay, bromeliads are these interesting plants that are called monocarpic. Once that one rosette blooms, it doesn't bloom again. Now, what that plant is going to do is put out offshoots or pups, they're called little new plants that you can then transplant. Once the mother plant passes away, you can transplant it and fertilize it and make it grow and it'll bloom again. It takes a while. So no, bromelia, the one big rosette you got is not going to rebloom. It's just their nature.
Thank you. I did not want to give them that bad news, but I want to thank everybody for joining us and thank Virginia for this terrific presentation and wonderful photos too. That was really very nice, a whole collage of beauty that you shared with us. I want to invite everybody to join us next week for our last presentation of the summer. We'll start back up again in the fall, but next week we have a terrific presentation about carbon dioxide and what has happened during the pandemic and the measurements that they've taken and the evaluations that come out of it. So thank you so much again, Virginia, and we hope to see you next week, but then we really hope to see you again in the fall for our new presentations and more information. And as always, you're invited to the garden to be able to learn more from the horticulturists that are working in it, as well as to see the beauty that's created by our greenhouse and our indoor plants and our outside plants. Thank you, Virginia. Have a good afternoon,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.